Yesterday was an introductory talk. I tried to introduce you to Sri Aurobindo's life, his teachings, what he stood for. And as I was saying yesterday, it is a great misfortune of our country that we don't know our own Bhagya Vidhatas. We still go after foreign gods. We still do not recognize the people who stand for the real spirit of India. When Sri Aurobindo was in the forefront of the freedom struggle, he very often used to ask this question, why do we want freedom? Why do we want freedom? Oh, we are ancient culture, we have our own glory. So has every other country in the world. There is no country in the world which doesn't have its own glory, its own contribution to human knowledge, to human advancement. So what is there in particular saying that I want my country's glory to be re-established? He developed this and said, we want India to be free so that India can make its contribution to the welfare of mankind. No country takes a slave country very seriously. So India should first be free, and then philosophy is like agricultural. If those of you here agricultural economics and so on, you know, I am a great expert in agriculture. If you say, people will ask you, show me the crop in your field. And you take people to your fields and there you find your crop is half burnt, half devastated. So people will ask you, what kind of expertise do you have that you don't, your own fields do not give a very good yield. So we are all very proud of Upanishads and we are very proud of the Vedas and we are very proud of the Puranas. And yet, every young man and woman in India, if he can run away from India, he would run away from India. So the point is, what is this glory that we are talking about when we can't afford, like we can't offer a decent living to our own young people, and we make it look as if Australia is a better country, even New Zealand is a better country, leave alone the United States. So the point is that the old kind of chauvinism, that India is great, India's glory, it's very easy, when you particularly we are in a foreign country, most of us have a kind of guilt feeling. Oh, I should have been in India, I am here. Let me assure you, this guilt feeling is uncalled for. We live in the 21st century. The whole world is your world. You can very well come and settle down in the United States. But when you come down and settle down in the United States, do not think you have come here only for their money. You must realize that you belong to an ancient, glorious civilization and you have also a contribution to make which will enrich American life, and be aware of that. And for that, you don't have to go and propagate teachings. You have to show by incarnating those teachings through your own lives, through your own living. If you live a full life, if you live a fruitful life, if you live a life where the community is harmonious, if you live a life where you know how to integrate with the people around you and still be harmonious, that's a great contribution you are making. So, what I would like to say that to be Indian in the 21st century doesn't mean taking the flag and shouting songs of patriotism. India, spiritual India is the whole world today. The old geographical boundaries you have to cancel. And it is to this India, to this new humanity that Sri Aurobindo is addressing whatever he wrote. He is not addressing, he is not talking about the merely patriotic, chauvinistic, narrow-minded Indian who says everything in India is great, our Upanishads are great, but we don't read them, the German scholars read them. Vedas are great, we haven't read them, American universities study them. Puranas are great, we haven't read them, but some other people are reading them. As long as they are doing it, it's fine. It's not that kind of a patriotism doesn't help. We need a different kind of an outlook. Indians should realize what it is, what a great inheritance they have, what a great legacy they have, and what is the truth of their own ancient culture. You do not have to propagate. Truth doesn't have to be propagated. As long as you live the truth. Sri Aurobindo used to say, propaganda is for truth a kind of a poison. It ruins the truth. Truth has to be lived, and once you live the truth, people will look at your life and wonder what is the secret of your life of success and harmony. Then you know it is our spiritual tradition. Otherwise, spirituality is meant for merely export, just like Indian music. When summer comes, droves of Indian musicians are in the United States. Similarly, when the summer comes, droves of Indian gurus, teachers come here in the United States, go around lecture. But if at all spiritual message is needed anywhere today, it is needed in India as much as it is needed in America. Unless we imbibe this message, unless we can make the life of the country rich, something to offer to young people, there is no point in preaching spirituality to other people. And so we must always remember that we have a duty to India, we have also a duty to this American land which has given you so many opportunities, and that is try to be true to the spiritual genius of India. And that spiritual genius, I think, nobody has spelled out in more clearer terms than Sri Aurobindo. Now, I'll today take that as an approach, that as the theme of today's lecture. Now, in the 20th century, as you all know, in the West, particularly among intellectuals, the landscape is desolate. Nobody speaks of any hope. In fact, instead of going on and on, there is something I once wrote about this. I will read parts of it as a kind of support for this talk. We live in a philosophically desolate and devastated world today. During the last 100 years or so, we have moved from materialism and dogmatic rationalism to an absolute nihilism. Materialism and rationalism both had their moods of exuberance, hope and optimism about man and his future. But our age of nihilism sees mankind as a species swept from darkness to darkness, like a straw on a torrent by a ruthless, mysterious and ignoble force. Our age had been marked by an all-pervading sense of anxiety, frustration, maladjustment and inner disintegration. The most telling slogan of this agonizing age of nihilism seems to be, and this was during 1968, there was a student rebellion in Paris. In Paris, there was, and at that time, they used to write this slogan on all the underground stations, and it said, "Nothing is true, all is permitted." There is nothing like truth. Don't look for truth because there is no truth. And then don't look for any morals, any ideals, anything is permitted. And you can see, this is the rock bottom. And this is what nihilism has taught us, that there is no truth you can get hold of, and there is no measure which you can follow in your own life. Whatever suits your fancy, you do it, as long as you are on the right side of the law. Particularly if you are in America, try to be on the right side of the law. If you are in India, even that doesn't matter. You can be on either side of the law. You can always manage. Now, this is the turmoil that the West was going through when Sri Aurobindo was writing Savitri, sitting there in Pondicherry. And when Sri Aurobindo was writing Savitri, he was in fact aware of all that was happening in the West. As I told you yesterday, I gave you one instance how he engaged himself during the Second World War and came out on this against Hitler. He recognized Hitler was an Asuric force and Hitler's advance has to be stopped. And he came out, and history has now proved Hitler was really what Sri Aurobindo said he was. Similarly, when Sri Aurobindo was writing all this, in the West, there was this search, and I'll tell you very briefly how the West came to this conclusion that in life there is no truth. Do not ask questions like, is there a truth? Is there any value to patriotism? Is there anything true about human love? Don't ask these questions. These questions can never be answered. This is what all philosophies have now come to the conclusion. And as I said, in the student rebellion in Paris in 1968, this was their motto, this was their slogan: nothing is true, all is permitted. Just dwell on this and see, these are the darkest abysm of despair that the West has been going through. If you really read the history of the Western intelligentsia in the last 50, 60 years, they have really gone through terrible, terrible times. The Second World War in particular was such a devastating experience for all of them. And then they said there is nothing true, and you just live as you want to live. Nothing is true, all is permitted. Now, the point is, how is this related to Savitri? All that I have talked about, this is true of the West. Now, Savitri is supposed to be the story of Satyavan and Savitri. And when did Satyavan and Savitri live? They lived, according to Puranic stories, maybe about 5,000 years ago. Now, a question arises in our minds: if Satyavan and Savitri lived about 5,000 years ago, why should I, who am living in the 21st century, in the new millennium, why should I bother about what Satyavan and Savitri did 5,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago? So if you have interest, you can read Bhagavad, Puran, etc. But why should we read a new Puran in Sri Aurobindo's English words? And particularly this is poetry. Why should we waste our time? This is a question. Yesterday I tried to answer it in one way, and that is, here Ashwapati, Savitri's father, was none other than Sri Aurobindo himself. And here about 1/3 of this book, about 300 pages, more than 1/3, nearly 2/5 of the book is devoted to Ashwapati's yoga, that is Sri Aurobindo's own yoga. What was his quest? What was he looking for? In the Mahabharata, I told you, Ashwapati was a king. He had all the moral qualities. He was a very strong king, except that he had no progeny, he had no children. And the story goes that he performs a sacrifice which goes on for 18 years. And that Vyasa describes in just 10 lines. 10 lines is all that it devotes to a description of Ashwapati's yajna. In Sri Aurobindo Savitri, these 10 lines are transformed into 12,000 lines describing Ashwapati's yoga. What is this Ashwapati's yoga? Ashwapati's yoga basically describes Sri Aurobindo's yoga. And what is Sri Aurobindo's yoga? Sri Aurobindo's yoga is basically this quest. Is there a way of bringing perfection to human life, not on the other shore of death? After that we are promised so many things. This will happen, that will happen. You will go to Vaikuntha, you will go to Kailas, you will go to Chinmaya, etc., etc. But this is taking a blank check on a bank which you have not even seen, which is on the other side of death. But here on this side of death, in our terrestrial life, in this body, is it possible to find perfection here in life for an individual and for society? This was the question Sri Aurobindo raised, and he said, so far we have found that nobody says this is possible. Most people have said this is not possible. Religions say this is possible, perfection is possible, but not outside, but inside. Here in your heart, you will have the kingdom of God, you will have peace, you will have joy, but outside, the outside world is the world of Maya. It's a world of illusion. Don't bother about the outside world, the inside world is all that matters. And so, religions have always taught, ignore the outside world, concentrate within. If you find the outside world too difficult, go and lose yourself in an ashram and take your beads and count, Ramanam or Om Japam or whatever you do, and go within yourself, find there God's presence, God's peace, God's joy. But what about the world outside? Doesn't that belong to God? This was Sri Aurobindo's question. And he was convinced that God was not a joker, that this world is not God's mistake. This world had a purpose, and that purpose was God wanted to bring perfection to this world. And the perfection he wanted to bring to this world through man. Man is the agent through which God wanted to bring perfection to this world. Now, what is this perfection that we can bring? How to bring it? This was basically what he was trying to find, trying to look for, and this is what I was talking about yesterday. Now, this philosophical nihilism, which is so chilling, which makes you feel so helpless, you will find in many, many places in Savitri beautiful expression of this feeling. I'll just read one or two, and you can see how Savitri is so relevant to modern man and his problem. This is on page 49. I have selected passages for which contexts are not necessary, because if I give the context, giving the context will take 15 minutes. So just those passages, just you can read them and apply them to the context I created when I described the nihilism, the materialism, that I talked about. This is page 49, about 7-8 lines from the bottom. A goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Where are we going? And most people say we don't know where we are going. A goalless voyage, he says, a goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will. This is all a matter of chance. Scientists used to say with great conviction until recently that right from the Big Bang until today, at this moment I am speaking here, this world is nothing but a series of random accidents. One accident, then another accident, then the third accident. There is no God, there is no plan, there is nothing. The world is not going anywhere. This is a series of damn accidents. Another accident may occur just tomorrow. Another planet or another meteor will come crashing down and maybe wipe out New Jersey from the face of this earth. It's quite possible. This is all an accidental world. Everything here is an accident. This is what we have been told again and again, and you see how Sri Aurobindo brings that. A goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will, or a necessity without aim or cause. Why is the world created? Don't ask me, scientists will tell you why the world is created. I will tell you all about this world, when the world was created, what stages the world has come about, but don't ask me why the world was created. I don't have any answer to this question. Where is the world going? Please don't ask me that question either. I don't know. The world is moving. It's a kind of a rudderless space vehicle that's moving in space. We don't know where it is going. Or unwillingly compelled to emerge and be in this dense field where nothing is plain or sure. Our very being seems to us questionable. You all talk about the soul. Has anybody seen a soul? Doctors have performed so many experiments, so many operations. They have cut open people's hearts, tummy, every part of their being, but nobody ever has come across a soul. So a soul probably just an imagination, soul probably is a fiction. When you get up early in the morning without proper sleep and close your eyes and sit what you call meditation, maybe you are hallucinating because you didn't have enough sleep. And in that hallucination probably you see something and you call it a soul. There is no soul. So, our very being seems to us questionable. Our life a vague experiment, the soul a flickering light in a strange, ignorant world, the earth a brute, mechanic accident. This earth that you see around you is a brute mechanic accident. Look at the way Aurobindo chooses his word. It's a brute accident. It's just a blind mechanical accident. A net of death in which by chance we live. It's a net of death all around us. There are so many bacteria, there are so many viruses. I very often describe this traffic conditions in Hyderabad. See, if you look at the traffic conditions on Indian roads, and you meet with an accident, you are quite surprised you meet with an accident. I am quite surprised that you don't meet with accident every minute, because the traffic is so chaotic. Similarly, life seems to be a pitch tent where everywhere there is death all around you, a net of death in which by chance we live. All we have learned appears a doubtful guess. Today's scientists will bang the table and say with absolute conviction, this happened. Only 15 days later they will say, some laboratory in Connecticut has thrown up evidence that what we believed was true 3 months ago probably is not true. Sugar is bad, avoid sugar. That we read. And your staff, I was teaching in a college, in a staff meeting, we were all making jokes about it, oh, sugar is not good, don't have enough sugar, etc., etc. Then 3 weeks later, somebody said, Harvard, somebody has discovered that sugar is good for the functioning of the brain, little sugar is good. This kind of thing goes on. There is nothing like truth. Now they don't know whether it is the Big Bang took place 15 billion years ago, 10 billion years ago, or 5 billion years ago. All that they know is something like the Big Bang must have taken place sometime back. This is the status. So he says, a net of death in which by chance we live, all we have learned appears a doubtful guess. The achievement done a passage or a phase, whose farther end is hidden from our sight, a chance happening or a fortuitous fate. Just read a small brief paragraph. Now, how did this come about? Until about 15th century, everything was nice and fine. Even for the West, there was the church, there was the clergyman, there was the priest, there was God in the heaven, and there was something called the soul. And we had a special relationship with God. God has no other concern but you and me. God always dreamt about you and me. God always concerned about you and me. God had nothing else to do. Suddenly came, the what is called the 17th century Cartesian philosophy. And Descartes suddenly discovered that there is only body and mind. There is a body, there is a mind, but God and soul he didn't find anywhere. And slowly all the transcendental notions of the medieval Europe began to disappear one after the other. God went overboard, soul went overboard, and very soon the world announced that God was dead, there was no God. The unfortunate thing was, we don't need God for God's sake. This is something people don't realize. God doesn't benefit whether we buy insurance in his company or not. After 200-300 years we realize God is required for something else. It is our need. It's not God's need. We'll come to it by and by. Then came this, a little earlier than that, came this Copernicus theory that it is not that the sun went round the earth, earth is at the center of the universe, even the sun went round the earth, and you and I are on the center of this earth, so we are a kind of center of God's creation. And it's very nice to feel so important that God has created the world for you and me. Suddenly Copernicus said, no, it's not true. The earth is only a speck of dust in this vast universe. And suddenly man felt as if he was betrayed. All his centrality, his central position was gone. Then came Newton, And Newton said, I know exactly how the world was created. I know how there are laws, 3 laws of mechanics. I know the world was created. There is no need for God. I could have created this world if I could create these mechanical laws. Now, with the death of God, with the death of soul, Bertrand Russell had a great influence on young people in America and Europe. But Bertrand Russell was a great poet, and he has written most feelingly about this whole business that there is no soul, there is no meaning. And he says in one of his books that man is the product of causes which had no prevision of the end they were achieving, that his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms. What are we? We are nothing but accidental collocations of atoms. There is no plan here, there is no God here, there is no purpose here. So we are just accidental collocations of atoms. Some atoms have come together and they made Mr. Nadkarni. Some atoms came together and they made Mr. Jagdish Bhai Vyas, etc. It's accidental collocation of matter. That no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve the individual life beyond the grave. This is a terrible thought, that however great you may be, whatever highest poetic and heroic feelings you may have, the whole damn thing is going to end when you die. It's a terrible thought. That is why in the beginning of scriptures, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, in the very second chapter, the Lord has spent so much time asserting to Arjun, Arjun, don't talk about killing and dying. There is something beyond killing and dying. There is something called the soul. And human life doesn't end with death. If human life ended with death, then there is no real measure, there is no purpose in life. Runam krutva dhrutam pibe. You do what you like, you can you can cheat anybody, you can do anything you like, because whatever you do, the life ends with death. But suppose what you do in some ways comes with you in your next life and in the next life, etc., you better be careful. So this whole business that there is a soul, that what you do today is not totally unimportant, it is very, very important. Your actions of today are very important for your tomorrow, is a great thing. And if you don't have faith in the soul, this is not me saying, this is Bertrand Russell saying, it's a terrible, terrible thing, that all this is going to end with death. That's why he says, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of the universe in ruins. So this is how, when the soul disappears and God disappears, life suddenly becomes a kind of a place where it loses basically meaning. Then comes Darwin. Darwin gave a terrible blow to Christianity when he said, look, God didn't create man as described in the Bible. Man has descended from the ape. We don't exactly know which kind of ape, but has come from ape. All your glory about God creating you, you are God's favorite, etc. Forget about it, we have come from apes. And that was such a terrible blow to the religious West of that time. As I was saying yesterday, the result is, today many churches are available for you to convert them into hotels in Europe. People have stopped going to the church. It's a very interesting thing. If you go to India, go to any village in Gujarat, most of you have come from Gujarat, and talk to a illiterate, there are no more illiterate Gujaratis. Everybody is literate, everybody becomes ministers. You don't know, Gujarat has changed very much. Illiteracy, that's a qualification to be a minister. If you are literate, you come to America. If you are illiterate, you become a minister. That's the situation today. Suppose, imagine there is an illiterate Gujarati gentleman in the village, and you say to this Kaka, you know what these people are saying? That man was not created by God as we all have thought. Man has descended from the monkey. He says, why? What are they saying, sir? That's why we have been always worshipping Hanuman. Before that we are worshipping Kurma. We are worshipping Varaha. We are worshipping Narasimha. You see, all this wisdom, all this that shook the West is incapable of shaking our roots, because we had somehow all this thought internalized in some sense. But the fact remains that Darwin is what Darwin did. Then came Freud. And Freud said, look, however rational man's waking mind may look, his psyche, there is something underneath the rational mind, and that's a terrible abysmal cave. And there are all kinds of dark forces. You don't know when these dark forces will arise and make you slip and fall down, so you can never trust yourself. That is Freud. Then came our great hero Karl Marx. He said there is nothing you can do, you are all bound by historical forces, economic forces. You are just a pawn in the game of history. Now we are in this world where science step by step makes you feel desolate, and therefore the great poets of this century said, the 20th century has been the age of the loss of faith, of spiritual desolation, of intellectual despair and metaphysical sickness. Auden's age of anxiety, T.S. Eliot's wasteland. Our deepest thinkers have concluded there is no such thing as history, that there is no meaningful order that can be seen in the broad sweep of human events. And as a philosopher, Western philosopher pointed out, that modern man, is alienated from God, he is alienated from the world, he is alienated from himself. This is what the situation is, and I am now going to read out a couple of passages from Savitri which reflect this situation, which reflect the situation the 20th and 21st century that you and I are facing. And I am doing it simply to tell you that you are not too modern for Savitri. You wonder whether you are modern enough for Savitri. That's the question you must ask, because Aurobindo is dealing with questions that face people in the 20th and the 21st century. And here is a passage. Once again, I won't talk about the context, because the context will take you away from what we are saying. A fragile miracle.
Could you tell us what
page 586. Page 586, about 6-8 lines from the bottom. This is how man is described: a fragile miracle of thinking clay. Armed with illusions walks the child of time. There cannot be a more devastating description of man. It says he is a fragile miracle. He is a miracle, all right. I told you yesterday that nature took raw material worth 15 rupees 95 paise and created a man who has today mastered the computer, who has been on the moon, etc., etc. But the raw material that nature used to make man cost only 15 rupees 95 paise. Is a miracle, all right. Miracle made of a handful of dust. A fragile miracle of thinking clay. All the thought that comes to our mind, with the help of which you can correct a machine left on the moon by doing something in your laboratory here, all that thinking, but this thinking is still taking place in what is called gray matter. It is still a form of matter, it is still a form of clay. So he says, a fragile miracle of thinking clay, armed with illusions, walks the child of time. What is it man has to defend himself? Illusions. Man has several illusions with which he wants to defend himself, and he walks the child of time. He is just a child of time, but he has illusions. And then he says, to fill the void around he feels and dreads, the void he came from and to which he goes. He magnifies his self and names it God. You know what he's saying? He's saying, children, in India, of course, I don't know what's happening in this American situation is totally new for me. In India, children normally sleep with their parents, right? And so, whenever they wake up, mommy has to wake up, daddy has to wake up, and the whole night goes in putting back the child to sleep. In America, etc., in Western countries, children have to sleep in a separate room, separate bed, etc. A sudden child wakes up at night, 1 o'clock, 12:30, and he looks around. It's raining maybe, it's snowing outside, maybe there is big wind, the curtains keep fluttering, and the child feels all alone, feels very much afraid, doesn't know what to do. He can't every minute call mommy and daddy. So what does the child do? He's afraid. And as a psychological shock, the child hugs its own doll and goes to sleep. The doll gives us a kind of a feeling, security. And so here, the poet describes, God is nothing more or nothing less than the psychological doll with which we go to sleep. When we wake up at night, and life has several nights, when there is nobody who protects you, there is nothing, you are all thrown on your own devices and get up, and you are afraid, you don't know which way to turn. So just like a child hugs the doll and goes to sleep, you hug your God and go back to sleep. That's the only reality about God. You know, Sri Aurobindo knows the human situation, the human plight. And when he puts things into poetry, you know, he does it for a specific purpose. These are the words of the god of death. When in their argument with Savitri, this is how he puts it. He says, a fragile miracle of thinking clay, armed with illusions, walks the child of time. To fill the void around he feels and dreads, the void he came from and to which he goes. He magnifies his self and names it God. He calls the heavens to help his suffering hopes. He sees above him with a longing heart bare spaces more unconscious than himself that have not even his privilege of mind, and empty of all but their unreal blue. See, man knows for certain God is up there. He never looks down. You know, we don't look for God here. We always look for God up there. He says, doesn't man know that in the entire universe there is nothing more conscious than himself? He is the most conscious being in the entire universe. What do you look for up there? Well, at most you may see a blue sky. And anybody who knows enough about physics knows that the color of sky is not blue. That also is an illusion. So what you see as blue sky, even that is an illusion. And man thinks God lives there, and this is the way, this is the kind of psychological vacuum in which we live. Western intellectuals are asking the basic question, is there a meaning for life? In India, we don't have time to ask this question, is there meaning to life? because we have to feed our children, we have to put enough money in the bank so that by the time you retire, you must have at least one bedroom house, two bedroom houses, and so on. You must find a school for your child, you must find a son-in-law for your daughter, etc. By the time you have done this, you're already 65. Here at the age of 15 or 18 or 19, you have a car, you have had a couple of girlfriends, you have a job, etc., etc. You don't have to worry about this. And therefore the Western man has greater spiritual needs than the Eastern man today. The Eastern man's whole day is taken up by answering questions like, where do I get my roti, kapda and makan? The West has solved that problem. Once you solve that problem of roti, kapda and makan, the problems don't disappear. More spiritual, subtle problems come. Where do I go from now? What is the meaning of life? What is it that I do? So in one sense, Indians in India are very, very lucky. They have no problems of this kind. They get a sound sleep, rest at time, because the whole day they have been struggling. They are quite happy that today I have been able to put 100 rupees in the bank. They are quite happy. But here, where all these things are taken care of, all these problems arise, where do I go now? What is the meaning of life? And my life has no meaning. How do we live? There are many French philosophers who have committed suicide. They have announced it. We find life has no meaning. So, to have meaning for life, why do I live? See, we have whatever it is. Maybe superstition, maybe something that our gurus tell us, whatever it is, we believe in it. It gives you a kind of a cocoon in which you live safely. So you must be grateful to that. Once it goes, it's extremely difficult for you to find any kind of support and sustenance. And the Western quest, therefore, for spirit, for spirituality is very genuine, because the fundamental basis has gone. The make-believe that religion offers is gone. So they can't live anymore in the make-believe world. They're looking for experience, they're looking for spiritual experience. Where is it available? So growing up here in wealthy homes where everything is taken care of, they leave everything and go there and wander on the banks of rivers and on the seashores, and this is really a terrible thing. But notice what has happened, because they are looking for one basic thing. What is the meaning of life? Why should I live? How should I live? Unless you know why you should live, you don't know how you should live. So this is the basic quest, and he is talking about that a central thing has disappeared. For the sea roars around him and earth quakes beneath his steps, and the fire is at his doors, and death prowls baying through the woods of life. Now, I have been doing this, as you know, just to convince you this is not an old wife's tale, although it's called Savitri Upakhyan. This is not something that happened merely to a king who lived about 5,000 years ago and did some tapasya so that he could have progeny. And that is not a real question for any Indians. Indians don't have to do tapasya for progeny. God gives them plenty. So we'll say this. Why should we worry about it? We should read this, because this in fact epitomizes modern man's struggle, modern man's dream. And Aurobindo brings back to modern man faith and meaning to life. Life is meaningful. And life is meaningful not in terms of religion terms, that you have to believe in a God and God lives in some other world, etc., etc. This is a different kind of faith, a different kind of meaning to life that Aurobindo gives. And one of the basic great things about Savitri is it brings back to modern man the faith he needs to live a purposeful life. This is what we are going to say today. I am going to then another passage of a similar kind, page 518. There has been a revolution in knowledge. We know everything about this world. So, He says, about 8 lines from the top, I have mapped the heavens and analyzed the stars. They are not any more mystery to me. The distance, you ask me the distance between star X and star Y, I can compute in no time. I will tell you what the distance between the stars is, what their shape is, everything I know. I have mapped the heavens and analyzed the stars, described their orbits through the grooves of space, measured the miles that separate the suns, computed their longevity in time. Tell me, I can tell you exactly when the sun will get cold and die. All this I know. I have delved into earth's bowels and torn out the riches guarded by her dull brown soil. I have, as a geologist, as a paleontologist, I have studied earth, I have studied layers here, and I know exactly when the earth was created, through what stages the earth has gone. I can give you exact dates. There is something called carbon dating, this, that, and the other. I have perfected all these processes. This is what the scientist is saying. I have delved into earth's bowels and torn out the riches guarded by her dull brown soil. I have classed the changes of her stony crust and of her biography, discovered the dates, rescued the pages of all nature's plan. The tree of evolution I have sketched. Exactly, I know what is the first unicellular life form, where it came, how it developed along so many thousands of years. The tree of evolution I have sketched, each branch and twig and leaf in its own place. In the embryo track the history of forms and the genealogy framed of all that lives. If you ask me, I will tell you the genealogy of every thing living here. The genealogy framed of all that lives. I have detected plasm, cell and gene. The protozoa traced man's ancestors, the humble originals from whom he rose. I know how he was born and how he dies. I know everything. How man is born and how man dies. Only what ends he serves, I know not yet. By being alive, what end man serves, what is the purpose of human life? Don't ask me that question. I know everything else. I know how he was born and how he dies. Only what end he serves, I know not yet. Or if there is an aim at all, or any end. I am not even sure this question is legitimate. The question, is there any purpose to human life? I am not sure this question is even meaningful. Schumacher was an economist, was an advisor to the British Coal Board. He was not a bhakta like me and Jagdish Bhai. He was an economist of that. He has written a book called Philosophy for the Perplexed, because he thinks what goes as philosophy now in universities, they will not answer any of your questions. Is there a God? They said such questions should not be asked. Is there love? Don't ask me. Is there a purpose to life? This question cannot be entertained. This is not even a question to be entertained. So you and I are particularly worried about these questions. The philosophy department says these are not questions we ever entertain. We are only concerned about the truth value of the propositions that you make. That's all. We'll tell you whether this truth value or not. This is what I will tell you. But whether something has a purpose, something has a meaning, don't ask us these questions. This is the desolation. This is the dark abysm in which the Western intellectual finds himself. He has no tradition. Once the Christian religion and its hold is loosened, there is nowhere for him to go. And Western literature of the last 50, 60, 70 years is a desolate cry asking, please tell me if life has a meaning, life has a purpose. If there is, what is that purpose? It is to this world that Aurobindo brings a rational, a well-reasoned system of beliefs, and that is his great contribution and his answer to the question. See, after all, this universe, with all the knowledge that you and I now have, is a speck of dust in the vastness of space. You and I are simply two-legged worms crawling on this speck of dust for a brief period of time. How can there be any meaning to your life and my life? And if your life and my life has no meaning, then all the questions that I have been raising for the last half an hour, 45 minutes come back. And it is to this world that Aurobindo has brought balm-like a strength and a faith that no matter how insignificant you think your life is, your life is valuable. Not only is your life valuable to yourself, your life is valuable to the entire creation. What you do, how you live is a meaningful thing, and it's not meaningless. There is a meaning to our life, each person's life. This is the faith Aurobindo has brought back to mankind. Now, normally, since this is a 2-hour kind of talk, and 2 hours is too long, I've spent a whole lifetime teaching in universities. I know 45 minutes is about the attention span. So after 45 minutes, you spend about 15 minutes, why does this chap not shut up? Right? So I normally take a kind of a breather and break for about 10 minutes so that once again we can come back and focus. So we'll take a brief break at this point and come back and then focus, concentrate on what Aurobindo has given as the answer to this question. I would like to begin by raising a small question for all of us to think about. Yes, as I said, I would like to begin by raising a small question for all of us to think about. When you talk about Indian philosophy, religion, etc., the most central concept is that of the soul. Right? Soul. Spelled S-O-U-L and not S-O-L-E. S-O-U-L. Now there is an interesting question. If you ponder this question, you will realize many of the questions that arise in our minds about soul, its existence, etc., arise because of our wrong conception about what the soul is. Basically, we have an idea the soul is like a locket, little locket, that instead of wearing it on outside, we wear it from inside. So it's a kind of a concrete, tangible thing inside. There is a soul. Now, consider present situation in India, where the population has reached or crossed, what is the population, Jagdish Bhai, right now? 100 crores. Okay. Now, when we became independent, it's about 40 crores. Now, where have these, now out of these 100 crores, each person must have a soul, right? There is no person without a soul. Now, where did this extra 60 crores of souls come from? Is there a storehouse? If God has, then where is it? Is that an email address that we can? And when, suppose, we do meet optimistic people who say India's population will stabilize itself and the population gradually will come down, etc., etc. Suppose this miracle happens and in the next 30, 40 years the population of India comes down from 100 crores to 80 crores. Where will this additional 20 crores go to? And what will they be doing? In Upanishads, there are various kinds of statements about the soul, or what is called the Atman. So, generally speaking, we have that Atman within us, but the Upanishad also says this is an error of perception. The Atman is not within us, but we are within the Atman. Atman is all around us and we are within this Atman. And if Atman is a discrete individual unit, then there must be somewhere an inventory of Atmans. And so, if there is an epidemic or a terrible tragedy like the Second World War and thousands of people die, how does God arrange to host all these souls who move? What does He do with them? And how are they looked after? All these are questions arise because our thinking about the soul is of a wrong kind. And the soul basically nobody can prove its existence. But all saints, no matter to what sect group they belong, have said again and again, once you have the experience of that reality, nothing in the world will convince you that the soul doesn't exist. And you will then come to the conclusion, the soul is the only reality about us. Now, if you want this thing, spirituality is not a matter of trying to understand things here. Spirituality is a matter of experience. The soul can only be understood through a direct experience. When you stand in the sun and every pore of your being is being penetrated by the sun, you don't ask your neighbor and say, please prove me that the sun exists in the sky. Because you have experience of the sun everywhere, all over your body. I'm asking this question because somebody said, I would like to know what happens to the soul after we die. Tell us very briefly. Now, it's not too difficult because in various kinds of scriptures there is a description of what happens to the soul when it dies, etc. But the basic thing I would like to caution you against is thinking of the soul as something very discrete, as a unit, and therefore you think there are 100 crores of people, that means 100 crores people. Now suppose India's population becomes 150 crores, God forbid, but it's not given the track record of Indians, it is not inconceivable. Now where will God bring these 50 crores from? Where is the store? Is there an unlimited supply of souls? And if they do not manifest, where do the souls go? Now all these questions are very interesting questions. I am not suggesting or trying to answer these questions, but trying just to move you away from a certain kind of thinking about the soul, that the soul is something concrete and that is hanging within ourselves, and then when we die it somehow flies like a kite into the sky. Soul is not that kind of a thing, it's a real thing. And its reality, its nature, etc. is only open to experience, direct experience. If somebody hasn't had any experience of love, how will you explain to him what love is? Right? So, soul is also something of that kind. And that's the greatest thing about this life. And saints have said, even if you have the experience of the soul for a fraction of a second, you will never be, after that you will have never a fear of death, Because you will say, what is death? I don't know. I would like to know what death is. Death is an illusion. This kind of an experience you have. So that's the latest thing about Indian philosophy. And Yajnavalkya proclaimed it a long, long, long time ago. And one thing that modern quest for whatever missing is this central notion of the spirit. What is spirituality? Where do we go? Spirituality is basically, we have all kinds of, particularly in the modern age, there is modern spirituality, there is quest for spirituality. Spirituality begins with Hatha Yoga, Pranayam, vegetarianism, right? And all kinds of things are associated with spirituality. What is the difference between spirituality and morality? What is the difference between spirituality and religiosity? All these questions must be clear to us. Indians are the ones who have really brought up this notion of the soul and the spirit. If our people do not understand the notion of what the spirit is, then only God can save us. Because in India there is a total confusion about this business of secularism and non-secularism, etc., etc. But the Indian tradition is not of secularism and non-secularism. The Indian tradition basically believes in the reality of the soul and the spirit and that spirituality. Spirituality is basically what it really means. In fact, I can read out to you a brief passage from Aurobindo. There is nothing, Vyaso Chishtam Jagat Sarvam, that's what they said, that the whole world, whatever you want, you can find in Vyasa's Mahabharata. And similarly, modern man's question, whatever question you can ask, you always find an answer here. I will briefly take this time to read out a little bit about how Aurobindo defines spirituality in Savitri, the quintessence of it, because this is the most confusing thing. And then I will go on to answer the question I raised in the first of my talk and left unanswered. I know that it's already 8:35 and you have long ways to drive back, but our Bhattbhai has said in America Saturday evening is a free evening. You can go on until 10, but I am not prepared to take him as seriously as that. But I may exceed the time limit of 9 by maybe 10-15 minutes. Is that okay? Yes. In very early in Ashwapati's, talking about Ashwapati's yoga on page 23, there is a set of 30 lines which to me describes quintessentially what spirituality is all about and what the soul that we talk is all about. I'll read those lines, middle of page 23. This bodily appearance is not all. Most of us begin by assuming that we are primarily the body. If you review your own life, you will find to your utter surprise that 80 to 90% of your time and attention is spent on looking after the body, keeping it healthy, keeping it efficient, keeping it comfortable, keeping it well rested, because most of us really think we are primarily the body. But as you progress in life, as you grow through experience, you realize that this bodily appearance is important. Sharira madhyam khalu dharma sadhanam. You need the body. The body has to be looked after. But do not make the mistake of identifying yourself with the body. You have had several bodies before. You are going to have several bodies after now. Very often I tell my friends, they are quite surprised. I said, look, I am very proud of being a Hindu and a Brahmin and so on and so forth. I go out lecturing about Hindu philosophy and so on. But do you realize, at the back of that, there is an accident. If only I was born 1 kilometer north of the place in which I was born, I would not be today speaking to you in English. I would be in Brazil speaking to people in Portuguese. Because I was born on the border of Goa and British India. And there is just a little river separating that Goa from what is called Karwa. If only I was born just a little bit to the north of it. Being a fairly good student, I would have mastered Portuguese, I would have gone to a Portuguese school. I would not have come to UCLA to do my PhD. They would have sent me maybe to Madrid to do my PhD in Spanish or Portugal and so on. And then probably I would have ended up talking about Christian theology, this, that, and Pope, etc. The Latin American countries are all Catholic, so I would have been a great propagator of Christian faith. Just an accident that I was born only 1 mile to the south, born in a Hindu family, born in a Brahmin family, and you realize all these are such great accidents where you are born. Of course, in one sense, they are not accidents. Where you are born is also a decision taken by your soul. It decides where you are to be born. But the point I am trying to make is that our total identification with the body is an exaggerated thing. Our body is an instrument in which someone else lives, and this is what he explains. This bodily appearance is not all. The form deceives. The person is a mask. What we call personality, individuality. Western education tells us the most important thing about you is your individuality. Never sacrifice it. Stand firm and never allow your personality to be compromised. You really analyze your personality and you will realize your so-called personality is a borrowed personality. It is not your own. As I said, the accident of birth, that you were born in Gujarat, you went to school in Baroda, then certain things happened, your associates, your friends, the culture that you lived and grew up, all these things influence your so-called personality. It is not intrinsic to you, it is something borrowed. The personality is the dress of your ego. That's not the real being that you are. And therefore he says, the form deceives, the person is a mask. Hid deep in man, celestial powers can dwell. Whatever powers we now have on the surface, they are not the only powers we can command. Deep within us, there are other powers, which are almost heavenly powers that we have, which are not even aware of. And then comes what seems to be the most crucial line. His fragile ship conveys through the sea of years an incognito of the imperishable. He says this body is a ship. What kind of a ship? A fragile ship. Your doctors will tell you how fragile this ship is. Any kind of blood pressure, diabetes, any illness, etc., can hit you at any time. It's a fragile ship. And what is the purpose of this ship? This ship carries, transports, conveys through a sea of years, through a sea of time, a traveler. Who is this traveler? This traveler is none other than the incognito of the imperishable. The imperishable supreme divine. His representative travels in our body, but incognito. You understand incognito?
Yes.
Just as all the Pandava brothers lived incognito in Virata's court, right? They hiding their real form in a kind of, real identity is hidden. God lives in each one of us, but His identity is concealed, and we mistake ourselves to be the ego that we are, the surface personality that we are, but behind this, the real traveler is this incognito of the supreme, of the imperishable, of the Godhead. God is like a big fire from which all kinds of sparks travel. And each one of us carries this spark within our heart, our soul. And that is the most important, most crucial thing about us. I very often go to Western universities and when they invite me, I ask this fundamental question that you all believe in democracy and say all human beings are equal. What is the basis of human equality? How can you say that, for example, a senator and a gardener are equal? The kind of contribution somebody who is educated, who is very highly qualified can make to the economy of the nation, etc. You can't compare that with the contribution a gardener makes or a barber makes. Barber, however skillful he may be, he makes a certain contribution, but you can't equate the contribution of a barber to the contribution of Einstein. How are they equal? On what basis do you think they are equal? Oh, they talk about Rousseau's, what is it? Social contract. Where is this social contract? I don't ever remember to have signed a social contract. What is the basis of equality? Let me tell you, the West has absolutely no answer to the question, what is the basis of equality? How are two human beings equal? The answer to it, you must go back to Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya says, two human beings are equal because the presence of the divine within them is equal. That's the only basis of equality. There is no other basis of equality. And the West has again and again and again denied the presence of this great essential thing about us, which we call the soul, the Atman. It is this that is important for us. And this is the reality about us. Spirituality begins by realizing that we carry within ourselves this form of the Supreme Divine. And he travels a certain distance because ultimately this journey of the divine starts from matter and has to end in Godhead. From matter to Godhead is a very long journey. Nobody can ever complete it in one birth. That is why in India there is the inevitable belief in rebirth. We come here several births. That's why in our ancient tradition they say, before you become human beings, you are animals. Before you are animals, you are trees. Before you are trees, you are just matter. From there, you have 84 lakhs of yonis through which you have grown. They may look to us like cock and bull stories. They are not cock and bull stories. I am not sure 84 is an exact number. 84 lakhs is not an exact number. What it says is how many births we have to take before you become a human being. And even after becoming a human being, you have to go several lives before the soul in you is recognized. You begin to recognize this divine travel within you incognito. That is recognizing that as the essential person in us and trying to experience him, trying to come into contact with him, bringing him to the front and making him the leader of our life. That is spirituality. Everything else, whether it is pranayam or guru bhakti or puja, all these things help, depending on the kind of person you are. For some people, bhajan helps. Some people, kirtan helps. Some people, meditation helps. For some people, reading scriptures helps. Nothing is debarred. And Sri Aurobindo therefore said, choose the form of worship that suits your nature the most, because each human being is individual. So ultimately our purpose, the purpose of all spirituality is to experience the presence of this incognito of the imperishable that dwells within us. Bring him to the front. And it is that which the Mother and Sri Aurobindo have called this psychic being. And the psychic being, when it comes to the front, it's like the sunflower. The sunflower, they say, has always its face turned toward the sun. The psychic being in us always is cheerful, it's never depressed. It is willing to wait an eternity of time before it finds the divine, but it waits patiently without going through periods of depression and gloom. That is the soul within us. And therefore he says, his fragile ship conveys to the sea of years an incognito of the imperishable, a spirit that's a flame of God abides. There is a spirit in us, and this spirit is a flame of God. It abides. Everything else disappears. Your name, your fame, your body, everything else disappears. only that abides, a fiery portion of the wonderful, artist of his own beauty and delight, immortal in our mortal poverty. Everything about man is poor. The only thing that is rich in man is his soul. See, we spend our life as if we are in a shopping spree. I have exhausted all the shopping centers of Hyderabad. I want to shop more. I went to Delhi, Bombay, I finished those. I went to London, I finished those. Now I understand there is in Paramus, there is a very big shopping center. I want to shop here. We want to shop more and more happiness. I want to fill my bag with happiness. Where is happiness available? And the Upanishads tell us, Amrutasya putra. You are children of immortality. Happiness is your very nature. You don't have to go begging for happiness. You are children of immortality. Forgetting all that, we go looking for happiness. And we look for happiness in finite things. Little more money, a larger house, little more fame, little more power. It never satisfies us. Nalpe sukhamasti. The Upanishads have said all these things. Nalpe sukhamasti. In the finite there is no happiness. Happiness always is in the bhauma, in the infinite. Be in contact with the infinite. Experience the infinite. Then happiness is your very nature. To me, this is spirituality. Everything else, whether you do bhajan or go to temple or don't go to the temple or you read the Bhagavad Gita or do not read the Bhagavad Gita, all these are instruments that help. Some people are helped by this, some people are helped by those. Everything, all these various ways our ancestors have followed, they all are helpful. Each one has to choose what helps him most and follow that and not insist on your neighbor following it. Once you make your own routine and follow it, you benefit from it. It becomes a ritual, it becomes a cult when you try to impose it on your neighbor. Do not try to do that. The greatness of our tradition, the greatness of our religion, we ourselves should realize that the last frontiers of freedom are Hinduism. If I do not want Hinduism to die, simply because if Hinduism dies, the freedom of the human spirit is dead. This is the only spirit. When Sri Aurobindo came and Sri Aurobindo wrote, he defied all that the traditional religions had said. But no Matadish, whatever his personal opinion about Sri Aurobindo, said Sri Aurobindo's book should be banned. Nobody said that. But there are many traditions in the world, like Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest. He was a paleontologist who made great research in China. He also came to the same conclusion as Sri Aurobindo came, that human beings are transitional beings. From man is to evolve a greater being. He wrote about all that. But since he was a Jesuit priest, they said, we will not allow you to publish any of these books. Until he died, not a single book of his was published. Since he had handed over the manuscripts to a friend of his, after his death, his books were published. And many seminars have been held in France and everywhere else, comparing the similarity between Sri Aurobindo's thinking and this thinking of this scientist. He was a paleontologist, he was a Jesuit priest, his thinking together. But as I said, in India, we never depart, we never banish books, no matter what nonsense the books are saying. There is no country where so much filth has been thrown on our own culture, but we have tolerated that. In Madras, processions were taken out with garlands of shoes around the photographs of Hindu gods. And all the people, they simply said, it's a funny spectacle. Let this happen in any other part of the world, there will be streams of blood flowing. We never do that. Well, if this is what amuses you, go ahead. This is the strength of our country, this is the strength of our tradition. We do not have to learn lessons of freedom and tolerance from anybody. This is the limit. We have this to teach to the world, that the path of the spirit should be open. Why do we have the notion of 10 avatars? No other tradition has 10 avatars. They said God came only once. And once is enough. But we say each avatar adds something, brings a new truth. Truth is an evolutionary thing. It develops as man grows. And Sri Aurobindo has come, brought a new truth because it suits the evolutionary growth mankind has put in. And so we always are open. Sri Aurobindo says, and Vivekananda also has said that, he says, the book of God has many unwritten pages. Which leader has ever said that? The book of God has many unwritten pages. And Sri Aurobindo says, all scriptures contain two parts. One part which is valid for all times, and one part which is limited by the time and the place in which the scripture was produced. And we never defend our scripture. Oh, you don't take this comma, you don't take this full stop. This is not the spirit of Indian spirituality. Indian spirituality is this path. And this is something, what Sri Aurobindo brought. Once again, Swami Vivekananda brought that. All the Indian Renaissance was primarily this movement, this expansion of the spirit from within. And if we want to be true to our Indian tradition, we have to be true to this tradition of freedom. It is in freedom that God has created this world, and it is in freedom that spirituality grows. This is what I wanted to say about spirituality, and I thought I'll take some time off to say these things, because whenever I go around to people, I keep talking about it. What is the greatness of Hinduism? Not that we have great people. Every religion has great people. Great people is not just our monopoly. But we have belonged to a tradition which is always receptive to new manifestations of truth. We never debarred anybody from saying anything. That spirit, as long as we continue with that spirit, nobody can suppress this quest, this tradition. It's only India that has been able to resist the onslaughts of foreigners for 1,000 years without losing link with its past. This is not a small achievement. You can call Indians any name, superstitious, this, that, the other. In Egypt, if anybody from Pharaoh's time came to modern Egypt, he will say, what happened to my Egypt? But even if Yajnavalkya came today, he will recognize something in modern India which will remind him of his India. This is the tradition we have kept. This is a very great gift we have, and this is something we have to preserve no matter where you are. And this is Sri Aurobindo's message for modern India. Do not ever forego this quest for freedom. Freedom of the soul, freedom of the spirit. Seeking for new expressions is something that will always go on. Do not lock up truth in a safety box. Truth is not something that has to be locked in. Truth is something which has to manifest, which has to get always open. Now, spirituality is primarily this spirit. It is not a dogma, it is not what you do in the morning, it's not whether you eat onions or whether you eat garlic or not, or adrak or not. This is not spirituality. Eating all, I'm not saying they're unimportant. They help some people. If they help, they must do them. And that's about all. But do not make a fetish of all these things. The essential thing about the spirit is that it is free and it is a manifestation of the divine within us. And once we recognize that and cultivate that reality within us, we are spiritual. This is something very basic. It's already 9 o'clock, coming on to 9. I don't know whether I should go back to what I have not said so far or reserve it for tomorrow and continue tomorrow. What I'll do then is I'll take up the question that I raised and not answered. How does Sri Aurobindo bring back to modern man faith that life has a meaning and a purpose? And it exactly defines this meaning and a purpose. We'll take this question up tomorrow. But in the meanwhile, if you have anything that you need to find out, don't question me, don't ask me very hard questions. I am not a philosopher. I am a man with enthusiasm for Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and I have great joy in their books. But if you have questions to ask, I have no hesitation when the question is too difficult for me to say I don't know the answer.
My question was, you know how we were talking about souls, and each person has a soul, and soul is the meaning of life. So, hasn't Sri Aurobindo also written extensively about the soul of India, or Bharat?
Yeah, when you say the soul of India, there is a soul of the collectivity, there is a soul of the individual, and there is also soul of the collectivity. That is why when you talk about Bharat Mata, it makes a sense that every nation is not just a collection of people, that there is something called the nation soul. He also has talked about the nation soul, and that's why when he was saying Bharat Mata, he was not merely it's not a poetic way of saying the people together. You know, he identified Bharat Mata, and he believed that a collectivity has its own individuality, its own essential being, which he called the soul of the collectivity. But there, as you can see, it is a kind of extension of soul in the case of the individual. What is uniquely yours is your soul. As I said yesterday, your body, your mind, your emotions, these are not quintessentially yours. What is quintessentially yours is the soul. Now, the interesting thing is, if my soul is a spark of the divine, your soul is also a spark of the divine, how is it different from your soul and my soul? Well, the basic idea here is, no two souls are alike, in the sense, no two souls have an identical destiny. And therefore, I am not in this world in competition with anyone else. Each soul has a unique destiny. Each one of us here is meant to manifest a unique aspect of God's perfection. And therefore, the whole idea that we're in a competitive society, that you are taking away my things and therefore I must grab it, this is not a spiritual ideal. The spiritual ideal is to say, my place is my own, nobody can take it away. My expression of the divine's perfection is unique, but the divine is infinite, and God can be manifested in infinite ways, and each one of us has a destiny which is different from the destiny of someone else. So that is what distinguishes you, that each one of us is meant here to manifest one peculiar, uniquely your own manifestation of the divine.
What is exactly the difference between dharma, that means religion, and adhyatma, that is spirituality? Religiosity and spirituality, difference, sub-difference.
Well, dharma is basically a movement from the human ignorance. So we all live in ignorance. Ignorance is the assumption, as I said, partly to identify ourselves with this body. Sri Aurobindo talks about, it's very interesting, those of you who haven't read Sri Aurobindo, 7 kinds of ignorance. There are 7 kinds of ignorance he talks about. And one of the kinds of ignorance he talks about is constitutional ignorance. You know, as I told you, that most of us believe we are bodies. Western ideal about what man is, they have taken from the Greeks. So Greeks said we are not just bodies, we are bodies, we are man's vital life energies, we are emotions, and we are the mind. And education primarily means doing something which develops your body, which develops your vital being, disciplines it. Art and culture are useful for that. Art and culture is not just whiling away time. See, we somehow believe mathematics is important, science is important, art is just wasting time. We don't, in India there is a feeling, why instead of art and culture, why don't you have a little more mathematics? Because everybody wants a child to go to IIT. They don't realize IITs have only X number of seats. Not everybody can go there unless you belong to the right community, right caste and so on. That's a different matter. But basically it's this idea that we are the body, we are the vital, we are the mind, and these have to be trained. Now, in most cases, this may work out, but man is not just all these things. Man is another aspect to him. And as long as that aspect is ignored, and that aspect is man's spirit, man's soul, something you have to do, just as something you have to do, your body owes something, your vital being owes something, you have to do something for the vital being, you have to do something for your mind. As I said, although I may be giving the impression that mind is not the ultimate, but Sri Aurobindo was of the strongest opinion that mind should be trained, mind should be cultivated. Mind is a tremendously useful instrument. Don't ignore it, don't throw it in the dumps. It has to be trained. But the ultimate authority of guiding your life must be given to the soul. It belongs to the soul. It's like, very often we hear stories about kingdoms inherited. When the father dies young, there is a small boy of 4 or 5 who is the heir apparent. He is the gentleman to whom the kingdom belongs, but he is too young. So what happens? There is a Munimji who keeps accounts to suit himself. There is somebody who drives, the driver. He doesn't drive for the benefit of the little prince. He drives the car to suit himself. And there is a Khajanchi, a treasurer, who keeps accounts to suit himself, not him. And there are various functionaries who do what they like. So our life is something like that. The mind does what suits it. The body wants to do what suits us. Our desires want to do what suits them. And our life is a Panipat battle between our body and our mind, our vital, etc., etc. And you never know what will win. Who will win that battle? This coordination has to be brought in by the soul. That happens when this child, who is now 4 years old, comes of age, becomes 18 and 20, and he realizes this is my Khajanchi, this is chap who is supposed to keep accounts to suit my interests, this is my kitchen, and the cook is supposed to take care of my interests, and so there is a new rule organization, and that organization has to be kept by the soul. And so the very fact that we do not realize how many levels we have of this Sri Aurobindo calls constitutional ignorance. There are 7 different kinds of ignorance. Another is temporal ignorance. Temporal ignorance is, most of us believe that I was born 60 years ago, 55 years ago, I have another 25 years, that's all that I am. But you don't realize this is only one chapter in a whole novel. Your present life is only one chapter. There are many chapters before, there are many chapters to come. If you realize all that, every minute of your life becomes meaningful, because how you conclude this chapter will determine how the next chapter is going to begin. So every minute is precious. Everything that we do is important until the very last minute. And nobody should ever hope to die before his time comes, because even the death is the decision of the soul. All these things come about. Now, we live in ignorance, but something we have a vague aspiration. We must go towards knowledge. And religion tries to build a bridge from this ignorance to this knowledge. But in trying to do that, it builds up a number of apparatus. It has its theology, it has its paraphernalia, it has its modes of worship, etc., etc. And most people get lost in religion. Instead of walking the bridge, we decorate the bridge. This is the bridge we have to walk. Instead of crossing the bridge and going on the other side, we are so enchanted by this bridge that we decorate it, that we say, my bridge is the most beautiful bridge. I mean, you are not supposed to do any of these things. If there is a bridge, cross over. If Christianity is great, walk the path of Christ. If Hinduism is great, walk the path of Yajnavalkya. Instead of saying, oh, Christianity is great, everyone must be Christian, everybody must be Christian, or everybody in the world must be Hindu. This is what happens to religions. That's why the English thinker said, we have enough religion to kill one another, but not enough religion to love one another. So religion is something very great. As I said, I have great respect for religions, although I believe that in 100 years' time, most human beings will realize that religion is an anachronism, that it belongs to the past of mankind. What the future of mankind will require is the essential truth of all religions, which is the spiritual basis of all religions. And it is that which is precious. Otherwise, a certain puja comes, iski khichdi banao, moong dal ki payas banao. This is because you belong to South India. You prepare payas of a certain kind for God, because in those days sugar was not available. In many parts of the south, even milk was not available. So all that available was jaggery and moong dal. So make it. Now, even in America, you must know, my great grandfather made a moong payasam for this puja, so I must make the same thing. The religion is something that goes on going this round. The religion's basic purpose is to push you away from ignorance. Religion is a path our ancestors have built, because not all of us are spiritual. We have a long way to go before we become spiritual. So all these things are needed. There will be some people in this society who will always need the help of religion, and some people who will say we don't need religion. So I am prepared to see a situation in a country like America where some people are followers of religion because religion helps them, and some people say religion restricts me, I want to throw away religion. Both these positions are completely acceptable. That is basically what religion is, and spirituality is ultimately the end to which religion points.
Hundreds of years religions are there. Whether religion has been created by the man or the God. And second question is, Hinduism believes in rebirth and past birth. Some other religions does not believe that. What is the fact?
You see, if it is convenient for them not to believe in rebirth, let them. But I will not get a good night's rest if I don't believe in rebirth.
No?
Because rebirth for me answers a number of questions. This is the whole idea of rebirth. If you read Aurobindo, you will see that rebirth is not, even in Christianity, there was a time when they did believe in rebirth. But about 500, 600 years after Christ, they had a convention, and they said to themselves, if man is told that he is going to come back again and again to this world, he will not take this birth seriously. He will begin to malinger. And therefore, why not say this is the only birth, all that you have to do is do in this life. So he will get up and start working. And so this whole idea of rebirth, Buddhists believe in it, Hindus believe in it. Christians did believe it one time, but no, they don't believe in it anymore. So at the end of your life, you are just in a cold storage until the heavenly last day comes, and then God will look at your record. If the record is good, then He sends you up to heaven. If your record is bad, He sends you down to hell, and you are there forever and ever. But here, every saint had a past, and every sinner has a future. No matter how bad a sinner you are, you have a future. So, you have to make a choice. If you do not want to believe in religion, nobody is going to force it. Rebirth, nobody is going to force it. But I find faith, just for example. Just take for example one example. Somebody has to come to birth. Okay. Now this chap will come to birth either in Buckingham Palace, that's one possible location, or in a Jhopatpatti in Calcutta, which is called the City of Joy. Okay. Now, where you are going to come to birth, what is going to decide? How will God going to decide that X must be born in Buckingham Palace and Y must be born in the Jhopatpatti in Calcutta? But if you have rebirth, then the soul has already decided for what birth it is ready, and this decision is automatic. God doesn't have to mata kurni. You understand? There are a number of questions like that, and again, as I said, the whole purpose of life is, this is a growth, this is a pilgrimage from matter, which is inconscient, to the superconscient, which is God. And this journey nobody can finish in one life. And that is why the whole idea, we are coming back again and again. Not only do we do that, one of the great blessings of this life is that there is death. Just imagine you living for 150 years. Because after 85, 90 years, you're a vegetable. So to continue for 70 years as a vegetable, you don't know what you are eating, you don't know what you are breathing, your sensitivity is all gone, you become totally useless. Instead of that, why don't you accept inevitable death, come back as a young boy with new teeth and new arms and new body for a fresh game. Look at that. And again, when you come back to birth, if you remember, in your last birth you were born in Nepal and you had 7 sons. Your new birth will be totally useless. So God has made sure you don't remember anything about your past birth. The whole purpose of it is giving the soul a new opportunity for growth, for new opportunity for experience. And this whole notion of rebirth has a number of philosophical implications, and that is why in Hinduism, rebirth is an accepted tenet, and Sri Aurobindo also accepts it. In the Life Divine, there are a couple of chapters devoted to rebirth and how it solves many of the metaphysical problems. This is what he talks about.